Hey everyone, welcome back to Every Version Ever. My name is Jonathan North, and today we're continuing our series on War of the Worlds with the first of a two-part episode where I'll be joined by Nicki, aka Trivial Theater on YouTube. Nicki is a huge fan of bad, cheesy, horror sci-fi movies, so I thought she'd be the perfect guest to help me talk about the other 2005 version, a mockbuster made to capitalize on the real 2005 version. This was made by the direct-to-video production company The Asylum, a company whose bread and butter is terrible TV and direct-to-video films. Since this kind of thing is right up Nicki's alley, I thought she'd be the perfect guest to talk about this film with me, and then I discovered that for some reason they made a sequel to this movie, so I figured we'd just get them both out of the way at once. But of course, Nicki and I always have a lot of fun talking movies, so despite the films themselves, we ended up talking for so long that I was able to make 2 full episodes, one for each film. So for today's episode, we'll be talking all about the Asylum's 2005 adaptation, which is apparently officially titled H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. I'm sure he'd be thrilled to have his name in the title of such a prestigious film.
Well, I guess to start, I first want to know what your relationship to this story is. Have you read the book? Are you a fan of War of the Worlds? Have you seen other versions? That kind of thing.
My understanding or my familiarity with it is a little different. And the first thing I had heard about was the Orson Welles reading
Hmm.
of it with the Mercury. I think it was the Mercury
Yeah,
Players.
Mercury Theater of the
Okay.
Air, I think it was called.
Ooh, of the air. Ooh. That was my first kind of understanding of it. There was a TV show that talked about it back when I was a kid, and then
Okay.
I ran across. You kind of keep it in the back of your mind, but the 1953 version would occasionally pop up.
Hmm.
And I always really enjoyed that. I thought it was colorful and it was really interesting and it was really well done. And then I ran across the Tom Cruise version from 2005.
Hmm.
And then I saw more of the radio play, and then I ran across these two. Or you ran across these two and showed them to me.
Yeah. Well, my original thinking with this was, well, first I didn't even know about if there was a sequel, but my original thinking was this movie, the first one, was made at the same time as the Tom Cruise one. I think it was to basically capitalize on that film's release. Apparently, that's kind of a thing that these cheap filmmaking companies do. So this was by The Asylum, which I've heard the name of, but I'm not really a horror fan, so I'm not really familiar with their catalog. Have you seen anything else by them? Is
Oh,
this kind of par
tons.
for the course with The Asylum?
They tend to focus on low budget. Well, generally low budget. They do some mockbusters, but this one was actually their first kind of foray into mockbusters, and they've done several follow-ups to it. So, like when Thor came out, they came out with their own version of Thor. They had their own version of the Avengers, but they make bad movies for the sake of bad movies. So, like Sharknado.
They
Um,
made Sharknado.
yes,
Okay.
like just crappy CGI, really over the top actors, a lot of C and D list actors. So people that might
Hmm.
have been big in the 80s or 90s, you'll see them come back in a lot of these.
They're desperate for something, anything.
Well, they're profitable
Maybe
though. I
they
mean,
like it too. I don't know.
oh yeah, like the level of shark movies alone. I mean, there's everything from like Ghost Shark to Trailer Park Shark to
What?
Sharknet. Yeah, two-headed shark through six-headed shark. Um, yeah, I'm sure that there's tons of others, but yeah, any of the mashups you see, anything like that. I mean, that is their bread and butter, and they're cheap to make. They turn them around quick because the CGI is crap and the actors are pretty low key. Lots of boobs and gore and everything else. So
Eh, well, I guess that sort of explains the opening scene. I was like, what is with the nudity? This is. I was not expecting that.
yeah, it was kind of random, wasn't it? That whole first bit,
Yeah.
even the swearing, like it just you wouldn't see that on Sci-Fi Channel, but I'm sure that they have multiple levels of that
Yeah, and
for what they
not
release.
to jump too far ahead, but that one guy, the one army guy, the mean one, the one who he's just insane.
He's
That
Jake
guy, the way
Busey.
he was swearing, it was like he just learned how to swear. Now he's got to do it all the time. Like so unnatural sounding. I don't know.
Well, and that's very much in asylum movies or tropes. You're not just gonna have you're gonna have like a smart chick scientist that turns out to be beautiful, and you're gonna have the stoic older man and the really Jack-esque characters and such, and that's just kind of how they roll. But that's actually Jake Busey, Gary Busey's son. So the crazy eyes. It's good to know that they're genetic.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that whole and just the age difference that tends to be a thing, like younger women, older men, kind of a thing. Like
I didn't look it up. I thought about looking it up and I forgot. I was wondering about the age difference.
14 years.
Yeah.
She was born in 80 and he was born in 66.
Okay. Well, the older you get, the less that becomes an issue. It is noticeable at some points, though.
Yeah, in this particular instance, she looks about, and not that she would have been, 35 at that point, but she looked like in her mid-20s, and he looks, the guy is C. Thomas Howell, and he played in, like, The Outsiders and movies like that of the 80s.
Okay.
So, yeah, there is a definite difference in age, and yeah.
Yeah, he seemed like one of the few like competent actors in this.
Yeah,
she was okay, but she was hardly on screen.
Yeah. Well, no, he did a great job. I mean, of the actors, for what he had to work with, yeah, he did very well with that. So,
I found it kind of interesting that they named him George Herbert, like flipping around H.G. Wells.
According to the trivia, it is actually an homage to H.G. Wells. So,
yeah.
Which, wow, that's really nice. For what they did in this movie, I'm thinking that H.G. Wells is probably spinning in his grave.
Probably. When I was watching this, all I could think of was like, when is it going to be over? But then I was like, even though I am not enjoying this, I'm sure I'll have a fun time talking about it later.
Well, there's a ton to discuss, and I never read the original book, but I've seen enough versions of this where, they all kind of take their own take on this. Mm-hmm. But this is certainly the most interesting, and I guess to stand out, you kind of have to, but it's what they did and how they did it just doesn't make a ton of sense.
Yeah. I have semi-detailed notes. Hopefully I can walk this through. There were parts where I could tell that they were trying to do like parts from the book, and other parts it was kind of like they were just off the rails.
Yeah.
So the whole thing with the dad and the mom and the kid, that is all made up for this movie. That none of that was from the book. Of course, the book happens at the end of the 1800s. So yeah, there are no characters from the book in the movie, but there are characters in the movie that I could tell were supposed to be not exactly the character from the book, but like their take on the character from the book.
Interesting. I was wondering about that.
I guess the family is sort of their take on the characters from the book, because in the book, the main character is never named, but it's this guy. I think he's a journalist, and he ends up separated from his wife. So that's their take on it. They were neither of them were ever named. It was just he was speaking in first person the whole time, and he always referred to his wife as his wife, and they didn't have a kid. So that's how that fits, I guess. But in this, what was he? It
was an astrophysicist, but they kept on saying, "Oh, you have all this knowledge," and he keeps going on like, "Oh, well, botany. Oh, well, it's chemistry. Oh, this. Oh, I mean, He was like the catch-all science guy."
Yeah, I mean, that was totally from this movie only. That was not from the book.
Right. Not surprising.
They end up getting separated because the mom leaves, and that whole scene with them like fighting over him having to go to work, it just seemed to kind of come out of nowhere, because they seemed like they were like a good couple, like had a healthy relationship, and then they're suddenly fighting about him having to go to work. That seemed like it came out of nowhere. It was kind of annoying to me.
Anything that happens in sci-fi movies, it's like right or out of Asylum movies, tends to be wrecking ball. There's no build up, and you can see that throughout this entire movie. There are times when that happens everywhere. So
okay, Well, they end up separated, and then he's leaving to go to work, I guess, when the first ship falls, the asteroid lands. And the way they shot that thing, it made no sense because, like, he's driving on the road and he sees this thing fall. It looks like it hits over a hill or something. But then, like, seconds later, he's running up to it. And all of these people, like, where did all these people come from? They're in the middle of nowhere. And all these people are surrounding this ship.
I had to laugh too because there was the one person he was talking to like automatically turns to him and says, "What happened?" Even though he arrived on scene. And next to him was a chick, like she seemed like the color commentary person. She said, "Oh, that's ginormous," and then she said something like, "Oh, it smells like ass," and it's just like that's not really what you say about, like it's just like who says that,
Yeah, that was another one of those things where it was like it just felt out of place. Like they had to be as edgy as possible.
Yeah, well, edgy for 2005, so.
This ship is different than what's in the book. It's different than other versions. It's their own creation, I guess. And everything happens a lot faster here than the book because in the book the ship lands and I feel like it's a day or two before anything ever stirs because it becomes like a thing for people to go and see this thing while it's cooling down because they can't get close to it because it's too hot.
Right.
So here, instead of having to wait for it to cool down, it's like these things are like immediately coming out. They're immediately attacking people, immediately killing people. And it's all really dumb. Bad CGI.
Oh,
really
terrible.
Stupid
Terrible.
reactions from people. And then the thing that ends up coming out, it's not even close to what's in the book. It looks like some kind of giant alien crab. And in the book and in most versions, they stick true to what the book says, that it's a tripod. Like it's a thing on 3 legs. And that's like kind of a hallmark of War of the Worlds is the tripods.
Right.
That's like a thing. And
That drew
here
me
it's alien crabs for some reason.
Well, they wanted to make it their own thing, right?
Yeah. Whatever.
Again, they're going to take it, and a lot of times with these mockbusters, and I don't know if it was so much with this because it comes from a relatively established story, but say they find out that there's a movie coming out about Thor. They're going to take that and they're going to rush it through production so it can come out before or right as the regular movie comes out. So they can, so people will be like, "Ooh, Thor, yay." And they're not realizing that it's not the right one. So it has absolutely nothing, like they'll stick super close to probably like the legend of it or like the story of it, but then they do weird stuff that kind of sets it apart. But it's such a weird configuration of things. It doesn't make any sense.
That kind of reminds me, and this is like I was telling my cousin about these movies, and I compared these to the cheap fairy tales like Aladdin and Cinderella that would be in like Dollar General. They're like bad animation, ugly characters, but it's like $1 and it's a Dollar General, so somebody's grandma's going to get it for a kid.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like the same thing but for adults.
Oh, totally. And that's the thing with any of these. That is exactly how you can relate them. That's all. It's the best explanation you could possibly give.
Okay, so after the ridiculous carnage, the guy flees and he calls his wife and they're going to meet at the Lincoln Memorial. So now his goal for the whole movie is to get to the Lincoln Memorial, which I'm not sure that there was ever like a specific goal like that in the book because like he knew where his wife was. He left her, now I can't remember, to go investigate something because I'm pretty sure he's a journalist and he had to go somewhere. Okay. So he left her with family. So I guess he is sort of trying to get back to her, but like they weren't separated in that she drove off angrily and now they've got to meet at some grand location. But that's what's happening here. They have to meet at the Lincoln Memorial.
Because reasons. Because I think that's where they got engaged the first time or something like that, and they were doing a like a marriage or he wanted to propose to her again because 10-year anniversary or something.
Yeah, something like that. He
Oh,
was telling that to the kid who is not that great of an actor either.
no. Did you notice too? They did the whole, oh, Alex has a cold. I think the kid's name is Alex. But oh, Alex has a cold. Oh, did you notice Alex has a cold? Make sure you put on a coat because you've got a cold. You know, it's just like,
Yes.
we get it. Viruses.
Yes, it was like beating you over the head with the foreshadowing.
Yeah. I thought they were going to do more with it, though. I got to say, like, first that
Yeah.
came up, and then, like, the rabies thing came up, and then it's like, oh, they're going to take a different take, but on the same idea. But then it just ended up being, oh, general viruses took him out, not anything specific.
Yeah, that was really strange.
Yeah.
Not that the rest of the movie was much better, but still. At some point in here, he meets this guy who's in the army. This is the guy from Iowa.
Woo.
And this guy is another one who he's not the same character from the book, but he's this movie's take on a character from the book. In the book, he was just called the Artilleryman.
Mm.
But I think what they did was take the character of the Artilleryman and split him into two characters, because I'm fairly certain that the insane army guy is like another version of the Artilleryman. Because the Artilleryman, he wasn't, I mean, he's better at the beginning, and then he's kind of crazy when he finds him again at the end of the book. So I think what they did was they took his good side and his bad side and split him into two characters. And he ends up staying with this guy much longer than he did in the book, I'm pretty sure. I don't remember him sticking around as like a semi-main character for most of the book.
I think it's the first night that George is out. He can't get into a shed, so he sleeps outside the shed, and then the army guy comes along, or someone comes along, and then they lift up the shed and get in underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that whole scene, it's like, that's so goofy. Why?
And then they didn't even stay there very long.
No, they didn't.
What's
And then
the point of this?
And then they leave. They just open the door and go. I don't know why, but I busted a gut at that scene. It was so stupid.
Yeah, it really was.
I had to laugh at the guy when they were in the little town thing, like where they were getting groceries and stuff. Everywhere he went, he kept like pointing his gun at stuff and like waving it around, like not in a malicious way. He just like, that's how he pointed at stuff, was with the gun.
The guns, I think that was another thing that I thought was weird too. It looked, maybe I'm wrong, but did all the army guys have like just handguns?
I think you're right. I think they all did have handguns.
Yeah, and that just seemed weird because I don't think that's standard. I'm fairly certain that's not standard.
Well, especially if you're going up against something like a giant, mechanical crab, I'm pretty sure that you'd want something more than just a handgun.
Yeah, I just thought that was weird, and I was like, did they not have enough budget for like actual realistic looking military grade weaponry? So they just gave them all handguns. It just seemed odd.
Very much, very much. Did you notice too that the good soldier guy disappeared? Like, there was that weird scene where they were like running away from stuff, and George ended up in a boat floating down the river. Like, he crawls to a boat and floats down river, but then the army guy just disappears and then shows up later in the movie.
Yeah, I don't know where he went, but I think maybe they did that because that's sort of what happened with the Artilleryman in the book. Because like he meets him, and I don't think that they were like going to go on a journey together or anything. But he doesn't stay with him. He is with him for a little while, and then they're separated for a long time. And then he finds him again, and I'm wondering if that's the only reason that they did that, was to have him at the beginning, and then so they could have him again at the end. I don't know.
True. I just assumed plot convenience. So
yeah, I don't know. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense to have him just vanish like that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and the brother that was the army ranger, like the big deal made about that. And then you see the guy, and he looks. I guess there's a certain image you have in your head when you talk about elite soldiers, and this guy
Mhm.
looked like a 50-year-old guy that was sunken cheeks and all that stuff. Regarded he was cut in two, but
Oh, is that what was wrong with him? I couldn't tell what was wrong with him. Maybe it
yeah,
was just my screen was too dark, but I was like, I can't really see. He's kind of buried. I couldn't really tell what was going on with him except that the army guy threw up.
yeah. No, he was from what I saw, and I could be wrong too, but the way it looked to me, he was like missing everything below like lower chest.
Huh. Okay.
How he was still alive, how they found him, who knows? Plot convenience.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm glad I didn't get too good of a look then.
Well, it was pretty. I mean, it was not tame, but it wasn't like like R-rated gore, I guess.
That's true. Like most of the gore and stuff in this was so fake,
Yeah.
which I guess is fine because I don't really like gore anyway. But it was still was like, especially like the skeletons. Like there were skeletons all over the place that were just red. I
Yep.
was like, that does not look the slightest bit real because that's not what would happen to a skeleton. It wouldn't be just red after being left out for who knows how long.
Right.
Like blood turns brown pretty quickly. So these skeletons are not going to be bright red forever.
You mean they're not going to be juicy? Darn.
No, and that was another thing with the heat ray. Like the tripods, the alien ships, everything have their main weapon is a heat ray. And as far as I know, I could be wrong, but like the heat ray pretty much incinerates everyone completely. Like they burst into flames and then they're eventually gone. It doesn't leave a skeleton, and if it did, the skeleton should be charred, not bright red. That made no sense.
Well, we're talking about Asylum or Asylum studio level physics here, so
Yeah,
all
I
that
guess
stuff
so.
they're not the same shot to shot, much less throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
Oh, you had mentioned how much time had passed. There wasn't really that much time that passed. There was maybe like a week, maybe two, in the course of this
Yeah,
movie.
I don't think a whole lot of time passed in this movie, especially not as much time as passed in the book. Because
Right.
I'm pretty sure the book was over the span of weeks. And if you count the time between the first sightings of the flashes on Mars that kind of foreshadowed something coming, it was probably months because the flashes on Mars, when the rockets were taking off, which they later realized were the rockets taking off, I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure there was like a weeks or months time between that, the sighting of that, and the landing of the first ship. So the book took a long time to happen, and everything in this movie was real quick.
Yeah. Well, and that's that. I was kind of wondering because there was a couple things like his clothes got so shabby so quickly,
Yeah.
and no, do not wear khakis during the Armageddon.
No.
But the other thing was too, like at one point they're in a house and there's like a Valentine's Day card on the door, and
I
then
noticed that.
and then later he's picking like fully grown carrots out of a garden, and it's like, okay, that
Uh,
doesn't work.
Maybe they just really liked that Valentine's Day card and they wanted to display it for always.
True, very true, very true. I like the way you're thinking. See that's Asylum visit. That's Asylum movie logic right there. It's like my kid made this. It's going in. I don't care.
At some point, he meets another character that I think is this movie's version of a character from the book. He finds this priest who is Australian for some reason. And I'm pretty sure that this is supposed to be the curate from the book. And the curate is another, like a religious figure that in the book, they ended up trapped under a house together. And they spent a long time together before, well, this sort of plays out similarly, but not similarly. There's a lot of weird stuff that happens between meeting the priest and being separated from the priest.
The only thing that stays consistent is the end of the world talk about how revelations shouldn't be happening this way and questions of faith, and they couldn't come up with actual dialogue, so they just went with like universal philosophical questions because, plot convenience.
That was another thing that was weird to me. Like, I could be wrong because I'm not Catholic, but like I grew up in like a super conservative Baptist area.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody around me believed in the rapture. But I am pretty sure that Catholics don't believe in the rapture.
I am Catholic, and I can tell you that, to my knowledge, I never learned about it until like the Left Behind books came out.
Uh-huh.
So there was always that, revelations will happen, blah, blah, blah. But, and not that I mean to blah, blah, blah revelations, but that you didn't, rapture is not a Catholic thing. At one point, though, I thought he said, he said, I'm not father, I'm whatever. And I took that to mean he was a pastor, not a father. But like the cross he wears is a crucifix, and you won't necessarily see a crucifix. Yeah.
Plus the collar.
Yeah.
He wore the priest collar.
Now there are like Anglican priests or pastors will wear the collar. But I've never known like a normal pastor to wear that kind of a collar. They really got their metaphors mixed, I feel like.
My feeling was they just sort of hodgepodge together a bunch of religious stuff that they thought they knew and got everything wrong.
And you are not wrong in that point.
It's just, there was so much about his dialogue that I thought didn't really make sense.
No.
But kind of now knowing how the asylum works, that's probably what happened.
Oh man, the digital effects too. Those were something. I even like matte paintings. Like there's that one giant boat, and I don't even think the water is moving. Like I'm pretty sure the water is all matte as well.
That was one of those scenes that could have been really cool if they'd done it right.
Oh, totally. But why would you want to put work into that when you could just put that up?
Yeah. There was a lot of things like that.
Yeah.
One thing that really didn't make sense during his time with the priest was the scene where one of the crabs somehow sneaks up on them. Like, what happened here? How did they not see this enormous tank coming up behind them? Like, or hear it? Like, they're not silent.
No, not even remotely.
That just did not make sense.
The part too where like, well, throughout they keep saying how hungry they are. Say you're a week in, and like they buy food from the one store when they're in the little town, and they buy like chips and something else. They don't even fill up the backpack with food. If you have the money and the town is still fully stocked, why would you not stock up with food? Like, I understand because they had mentioned like rotten food at one point. You don't want to eat rotten food. But all the canned goods, like all that stuff, you could have eaten for a good long time with, if you're scrounging through the houses that were empty.
Yeah. Like, and that's that scene where they bought all that stuff. The very next scene, it was like, where is all that stuff?
Yeah.
They weren't carrying bags. His backpack was basically empty. It was like, what happened to all the stuff you literally just bought?
Giant hole in the backpack.
It's just a trail of food behind them.
Exactly. Oh man, even the backpack disappeared scene to scene, and that's a tiny thing in the grand scheme, but it's just like, what? Why?
Just one more thing that they weren't paying enough attention to.
I will say one thing they did really well, like when they did really well with like desolate landscapes, and looking at the end credits, some of the places that they shot, they did a pretty solid job. Like it looked like disaster had just happened for the most part. I mean, it wasn't greatly done, but their set design was on point with a lot of that.
Yeah, the stuff that wasn't CGI looked pretty good.
Yeah, and with Asylum movies, that tends to be the case. Like the CGI, you can get by on most of the practical effects and kind of the set design, but you get into CGI in most cases, and it just falls down.
Yeah, there was a lot of that.
Yeah, yeah. And what was with the green? Was the green like fog that they had constantly kind of after them? Was that in the book?
I think that this was their take on the black smoke from the book.
Okay, okay.
Because in the book, there is a smoke like substance that is flowing over the fields. Like, it's not smoke, but it behaves sort of like smoke. It is disintegrated by water, but it leaves like a film over the water. But it's poisonous.
Hmm.
I think this is their take on that. They just made it green gas for some reason.
Shows
I
up
don't
better,
know.
I'm sure.
I just think that most of that seemed kind of pointless in the grand scheme of this movie because it came kind of late and didn't do a whole lot.
Yeah, that's true.
And the scene where they first see it was dumb. They were like in this house, and then they find this neighbor. It was like, what was with the neighbor? Because he comes out of his house, he's like all happy, and then this gas comes. Like, why is this neighbor so happy?
Other people, I suppose. Now I'm wondering if that was maybe like, and I looked through the IMDb on the first one, and I outside of the couple names I didn't recognize any, but he could have been like, say the writer or like random cameo type of a thing without being a cameo. Because again, that's a thing Asylum does. Like they'll pop in all these weird cameos. Like you look at Sharknado, and that's an extreme example. But you have all kinds of like random people show up and go, oh, hey, I know them, or hey, I know them. So
this is the point where it's their take on the scene from the book. They're underneath a ruined farmhouse. But in this case, I'm wondering if it's kind of an homage to the 53 version because they have another ship land on the house, which I don't think happened in the book. So the only thing I could think of was that they were homaging the 53 scene.
That would make sense
in the 53 movie.
Yeah, and that I think the Tom Cruise version took that too to some extent. Like the way that it's set up. I think you're right. I think it is homage to 53.
Oh, I didn't even think about that when the plane crashes on the house.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. There was a lot of like little sneaky Easter eggs in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked watching it again now because when I first saw it years and years ago, I had not seen the 53 version. So I only picked up on a few things from the book, but like there's a lot more once you start watching it with the knowledge from the 53 version. You get a lot of Easter eggs.
Mm-hmm. And it's not like I'm not a huge fan of the version. Like it's well put together, but it never really much appealed. Like I guess the 53 version, and that's just because it was the first one that I saw of the two.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just had that, I don't know, it just had that appeal. Like it's done so well.
The Tom Cruise one has a lot of issues.
Yeah.
I enjoy parts of it a lot, but other parts of it annoy me.
Yeah. No, I hear you loud and clear. What did you think of like the lyric music or the lyric part of the soundtrack and like the sound effects? Like the sound effects to me were just really weird.
There was a bunch of weird music in this. I can't remember the sound effects too much, but I do remember specifically thinking, what is with this music? Multiple times.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
It almost seemed like, I mean, I guess since it's 2005, maybe this makes sense, but it almost seemed like weird 90s music at times.
That's true. That's true.
It seemed so out of place.
No, I'm not going to disagree with you. It did, and it was disjointed. Like it wasn't good 90s music.
No.
It was just like really 90s music.
No, yeah, it was like they wanted the cheapest music they could license, and that was what was left over.
They had to pay C. Thomas Howell all his hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
Did you notice, for instance, and obviously they're not tripods. I don't even think they give them a name in this one. But did you notice that they it was more a movie that had them but it didn't really star them. Like, there was more human stuff than there was actual stuff with the tripods.
Yeah, I did notice that. There was very little, well, I mean, not very little, but like a lot less alien stuff than you would expect, especially since this is War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
You would expect more scenes of destruction, and really there were only kind of just a few big scenes and a lot more with the people, which is fine if handled correctly, but I don't think they handled a lot of it correctly.
No,
So
not even remotely. Well, it was almost like a Transformers movie where, like, it says Transformers. They say, "Ooh, look, we've got Transformers," but it's like it centers around Sam Witwicky.
okay.
Like,
I've only seen the first Transformers movie. My friend has told me don't ever watch any of the rest of them. They're horrible.
I don't blame you. They're not worth. They're really not worth your time. But they don't. They're kind of auxiliary characters in a movie that should be focused on them, and that's kind of what I got from this one, in that respect. So
yeah, that makes sense. We're still under the house, but this is like a vet clinic, and this is where we get the stuff with the rabies. Like, there's rabies vaccines, and I don't really know where they were going with all that. There was like, he wanted to infect them with rabies, but like, how is he supposed to know that that would even work? Because in the book, nobody would even thought that. Like, the only thing that they tried was to shoot them like with like artillery fire. Like, they were trying violent ways of doing it, and nobody even thought of viruses. And unless you had read War of the Worlds, like, now that War of the Worlds is like in the public consciousness, if aliens were ever to attack, I think people would try that.
Oh, totally.
But in this world, I'm assuming that War of the Worlds has never been written. So why is that his thing? Like, we got to give him rabies. That's the only thing that'll take him out. Like, where does that idea even come from?
And I think it was more the idea of infectious disease more than it was actually like rabies specifically. I think that probably like made the idea come into his mind. It's still a dumb idea because like the thing that undid them in the book and all the other movies was their own exposure to the thing that they needed most, human blood, which didn't even come up. Like, they didn't talk about that at all.
No, I made a note of that too. I was like, why didn't anyone even mention the blood?
Yeah, they were trying to, it seemed like they were trying to have their cake and eat it too, as far as like, this unknown threat that we have no idea what it is. We have no idea what it's going to do. But yet, yeah, like you say with George, he's like, ooh, infectious disease or rabies or whatever. It could take them out.
Right now, there's another weird thing that I guess I forgot to mention it earlier, but it happens again to the priest. Well, first he's like having this crisis of faith, and he's talking about like he's lost his faith, and then there's the whole thing with the rabies, and then suddenly he regains his faith, and then he's immediately melted. It was so dumb.
The face melting scene was pretty solidly done though. Like, of the effects in this movie, that one wasn't bad.
I guess so.
Grand scheme.
It had happened earlier too. At the beginning, somebody else got melted.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Both times I was like, "What is this? This is not from the book." They just wanted to melt somebody, I guess.
They did. They were like, "Hey, we've got a whole bunch of facial prosthetics we want to use. What can we use them on? Let's melt somebody's face."
Yeah, that was not from the book at all. There was no similar weapon that the aliens used. That was just something that they made up. Anyway, at this point, he flees the place where the priest got melted, and this is where you get the carrot scene. But one thing that I noticed with the carrots that he's yanking out of the ground and scarfing down, there's no dirt on them. It's like, carrots are covered in dirt when you pull them out of the ground. These are like practically perfect.
They come from the best farmer's market. All of the money, like all the extra scripting money or all the extra money for the movie went to those carrots.
And they couldn't even, they didn't want to mar their image with dirt.
No.
It had to be pristine. pristine.
Oh, totally, totally. I mean, Guy can totally be covered in dirt, but yeah, carrots. No.
At some point in here, he is reunited with the army guy, and then also the insane army guy. And I forget exactly why it happened, but like he ends up, the insane guy shoots the nice army guy in the head, and then our main character George smashes him in the head with a rock, and then the rest of the army just wanders away.
well, from the first time they got together, the crazy army guy talked about how important George was because it's scientists that's going to save us. And then when they meet up again, he says, "Oh, scientists are so important. They're more important than all of the rest of us." And then he turns around, and then he pops the guy in the head because, they're nothing compared to the scientists.
Yeah.
Which, again, probably a classic Jake Busey move, given his dad, but not so much a, normal army man.
Yeah. I just thought that whole scene was super weird.
Yeah.
Especially the way it ended with the rest of the army just sort of watching and then wandering away.
Yeah. Well, they're like, well, okay, I guess we're back to wandering. Okay. Taking my rations and go.
And then we finally get to the Lincoln Memorial, and I couldn't really tell what was going on here. Was that an alien? Like, was that supposed to be the creature out of the ship that he finds?
It was supposed to be one of them.
Tube thing.
Yeah, it looked like he had those at Halloween they fill up garbage bags with leaves and they become like spiders and things like that. That's what that it's like. It looked like a friggin' like an upscale version of like that.
Yeah, I think you're right. It looks so stupid.
Oh man. I just like standing there and then it goes, ew.
Yeah. Like there's a whole thing where he's like begging this thing to kill him, and I was like, what is that thing? What is he talking to? And then it falls over.
And like the insistence, let's just say, kill me.
Yeah. It was really dumb.
Oh man. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like that giant not tripod, sneaking up on those two guys, all of a sudden out of nowhere comes all these people. Like literally tens of people.
Yeah. Including his family.
Yes, of course, because, why not?
And then that's basically the end.
Well, no, at the very end credits, they have a mention of no aliens being harmed in the making of this movie.
Oh, I didn't even watch. I was like, I need to get on to the next one and get this over with as quick as possible.
I'm a credit watcher. Like, I watch all the way to the end because normally there's little goofy things in a lot of the movies I watch, which says something about the movies I watch. But
I do that with movies I like.
Yeah, true. But it was cheeky and kind of fun, and it's like, well, that was the best thing in the movie right there, was this little thing about no aliens being harmed. But there you go. That's War of the Worlds, 2005 ripoff edition.
That's the best name for it. They should have marketed it as that.
Thank you so much to Nicki for joining me for this episode of Every Version Ever. Like I said at the beginning, while researching for this series, I discovered there was a sequel to this film, and Nicki and I decided to cover it while we covered this one. So next time we'll be talking about the 2008 film, War of the Worlds 2, The Next Wave. I'm so excited. But no, really, as bad as these movies are, talking about them with Nicki is so much fun, so even though I can't in good faith recommend the films, I can recommend that you listen to us talk about them. But before we go for today, at some point Nicki and I went off on a long tangent that was almost completely unrelated to the movies themselves, and it was so long and irrelevant to the main conversation that I had to cut it, but I wanted to save it somehow because this is the kind of thing that I personally would like to listen to. For context, Nicki and I are both from Iowa, though I think we're on opposite sides of the state, and a character in this movie was also from Iowa, And that led to a huge tangent that was fun for us, but like I said, ultimately irrelevant to the main discussion. So I figured I'd save it and throw it in at the end as a little bonus for those of you who wanted to stick around for it. Either way, we'll see you for the next episode on Every Version Ever. Thanks for listening.
One of the people, I think it was the soldier, I think it's Carrie is the soldier. He talks about being from Iowa and mentions how many June bugs they had. It's like, oh, that's interesting. It's a little Iowa.
I noticed that. I wrote that down somewhere in my notes.
It's like, really, I'd think more skeeters than June bugs, but
Well, it depends on the time of year. Like around here, there's like a certain time of year where there's like June bugs everywhere.
Really?
At least where I am. Like,
right.
You can't go outside with a light on without getting mobbed by bugs, and not just June bugs, but like moths and everything.
Yeah. We get a certain time of year here. Right around the 4th of July, and I'm right off of the Mississippi, and God, the fish flies. I think they're just mayflies. They live for a day and die.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God! Like on a bad year, you talk nuts. There are places and times when the freaking things are 6 inches deep. It's just nuts.
Yeah, there was one year. Speaking of bugs everywhere, I don't remember what year it was. It's been a long time, but it was like a plague of millipedes.
Oh,
like those little worm things, not the ones with the long legs.
Yeah,
they were everywhere. There was like everywhere in the house too. Like this is like semi-horrifying, but like you could see the carpet moving. There was so many.
Oh God!
And like we were trying to vacuum them up with like a shop vac. And, like Dad would like scrape the carpet and get a pile of them. It was horrible. I don't know why they were so bad that year.
Well, there's so many. Well, they were talking. I've got a friend out in South Carolina or Kentucky. One of the two. I think it was South Carolina, but they do the 7 years. What are they? Not locusts.
Cicadas.
Cicadas, yeah. And apparently that hit this year as well as like everything else. So.
Well, cicadas, I don't know that they're much of a nuisance as they are just loud.
I think it's just more the amount of them. Like I guess anything, if you get too many of them, but like they get overrun. So, but
I don't think we've ever had a problem being overrun by cicadas, but they can be very loud if there's enough of them.
Oh yeah. Agreed. Well, and it's just like you get fish flies here. There's a little town that's an island down south, like south of Davenport, and it's
an island in Iowa.
It's right on the river, so like the river splits around it, so you have to take a bridge to get to this little town. It's called Sebula, and then you have to take another bridge to get to Illinois.
Huh.
It's just a real little town, but they had fish flies so bad the one year they actually had to pull out all the plows, like all the plow trucks,
and
salt because it was so slick because there was so many on the roads.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It's like disgusting. Just like the smell of them is like, you look at it and go, yep, that smells awful.
Huh.
But.
Well, I know that we were talking about bugs, but like the thing I got out of that was like Iowa has an island that I did not know about. I'm forever finding out new things about my state that I never knew. Like I didn't even know we had cliffs here, but we do.
Yeah, I live on one. So, well, not cliffs. Well, I guess there are cliffs, but where I'm at is one of the tallest, like steepest roads in Iowa is not very far away from me. So, yeah, it sucks in the wintertime. You don't drive on it, if it's snowing. But
oh no, we've been snowed in at where we are at times. There was one year we had snow that went up, like they had a specialized plow come through to dig us out because the snow was so deep.
Wow!
So up to the top of the mailbox.
Oh my God!
Plow had to come through, and I bet that at points on our road the snow was like 10 feet high. It was like you had to look way up to see the top of the snow.
Wow, that's amazing and scary, and I'm glad you're okay.
It was like my family came here from Canada when my dad was a teenager.
Oh wow!
And we'd always hear stories about Canadian winters. So it was almost like we were living through one of Dad's stories of his childhood.
I can imagine so. Oh God, that's awesome. Well, I'm glad you came to Iowa. You know, Canadian nice, Iowa nice,
Yeah,
all relative.
it was the perfect place for Canadians to move to.
Oh, totally, totally. Well, and it's you know it's relative. I'm sure it's warmer here than what you'd get up in. I mean, from what I understand of Canada, I don't know it well, but
Hmm.
just given altitudes and stuff, or not altitudes, but like where you're at.
Yeah, further north you get.
Yeah. Like I got friends up in northern Wisconsin, and they get like 3 months of nice weather a year. The rest of it's either snowing or going to snow or recovering from snow. So,
Hmm.
but they're pretty rural though too. So,
Well,
alrighty,
that was certainly a rabbit trail.
yes, it was. Went from I guess we went from June bugs to Canada, so that's not so bad. There are weirder tangents.
Well, I suppose we should get back to the topic at hand.
Do we have to?
uh, yeah, that's what we're here for.
True. And they weren't bad. They just, yeah. Anyway.